But yeah, it sounded very clear, so that was great. And it was really important information too. So everything you were saying, I was kind of jotting down just to make sure. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about the insurance. Okay. So I don't know if, I know you've worked with, and you also have a team of doctors and specialists. So if you could remember working with the pain physician, because it sounds like you have a pain specialist that then works with your primary care physician. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if we could think about what the communication is like, so these next questions will pertain to those kind of appointments.
Okay.
So, for example, when you do go see the pain specialist, what's the ideal length of time you would like to spend with them?
I've only had one appointment with the current person who's trying these new things.
Okay.
And the appointment that I had with him lasted about an hour and a half because he actually came into the home and demonstrated the machine and made sure that I understood how I was to use it and the frequency of using it.
Okay. So the pain specialist has introduced you to the new therapies?
Right.
Oh, okay. Great.
And then he's going to be having his assistant come back out next month.
Okay.
And review the procedures with me and make sure that any questions I have are answered and review again that I'm using the machine correctly.
Okay.
And check the machine to make sure that it's operating correctly.
Okay.
So that is something that I was really amazed at.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Can you tell me a little bit about what made it so amazing for you?
Well, because I've never really experienced a doctor coming into the home.
Uh-huh.
I did, I had a seizure when I was, the hot water wasn't working. I was boiling water to use for the bath, and I spilled the hot water on me and ended up with a third-degree burn. So during that time, the nurse came into the home on a daily basis to help me change the dressings and stuff. So I have had experience with medical professionals coming into the home, but home visits is something I haven't heard of since back in the 50s.
Sure.
When I was a very young girl. That's just not, something that's very common anymore.
You're right.
But because of this clinic, I guess, they work with some doctors that are willing to come into the home on a short-term basis just to make sure that, and again, I think it's probably because they're working with an older population.
Okay.
That the person, is very sure of what they're doing.
Sure.
Part of the idea behind this clinic, and I think they have some government funds to help them with it, is to keep people in their homes as opposed to institutions or nursing homes. So I think they have some funding that other locations don't have.
I see.
That make these things possible, because they also have a podiatrist scheduled to come to work on some footwear and other things that may ease the pain in the ankles, give more support than shoes that you can buy over the counter.
Sure.
And he again is coming into the home.
Wow.
To make sure everything is fitted properly, make sure that I'm comfortable.
I see.
So I kind of just got a flyer in the mail for this particular clinic, but
yes. Which clinic is this?
It's called. Hang on. I've lost the name of the place. Give me a second.
That's fine.
We can keep talking while I'm looking for the name.
Oh, sure. And you said you just found a flyer in the mail?
Right. There's Ken Care.
Oh.
KenCare. And they have their own transportation. They Gen Care. JEN Care.
Okay. JEN. Okay. Well,
And I
that
guess
sounds
they're
amazing.
located, they have several different locations. The one that I see is within 6 miles of my home.
Okay.
And they don't have too many specialists there. The neurologists and psychiatrists that I see are through the University of Chicago.
Oh, I see.
But everything else is through them.
Okay, so the pain specialist is through Gen Care.
Right.
Okay. But your primary care is at University of Chicago?
Is
through
Gen Care. It's only the two specialists, the psychiatrist and the neurologist, that are through the U.
I get it. Oh, great.
So it's nice because when you're in an office, you're not always, especially when you're being fitted with a machine and that kind of stuff, you're not always, sure that it's going to work once you get home.
Exactly.
So the idea of the person coming out and then having their associates follow up with me, is, I think it's going to work out really well. As I said, I'm new to it. But one of the things, I just got a service dog.
Okay.
When they fit me for the shoes, the next time the pain specialist assistant comes out, he'll be walking with the dog with me to make sure that the shoes are, fitted properly and that they alleviate some of the pain when I'm walking.
I see.
Because I've had a lot of experience with getting something and then discovering that when I try to use it, it's not effective, where it appeared that it was going to be when it was more abstract.
Right. It's not quite as easy or, I guess that's the best word, or smooth when you transition through that.
Right.
I see.
And same way with the machine. You'll be able to, when the assistant comes out, he'll be able to work with me to determine whether we need to increase the amount of stimulation, increase the frequency, what we need to do to make it work better for me.
Okay, so are you daily basis right now?
Yeah, I use it twice a day.
Okay. And how is it working with the machine? Like, is it pretty easy to use?
It's, for the most part, pretty easy to use. What I'm running into problems with is that because of the tremors that are caused by the Parkinson, it's not, the buttons are somewhat difficult for me to use because of the size.
Okay.
So one of the things that they're exploring is whether there's a adaptation that might be able to be made to make the buttons less sensitive to the touch and bigger.
Okay. That would be very helpful.
Right. So I'm kind of a guinea pig because they haven't run into somebody with as many complications that they've used on the machine so far because it's a relatively new device.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you'll be able to contribute a lot to this.
Yeah. And the flexibility that they're willing to give me, I think partially because they'll be able to use it, apply it to other patients.
Absolutely.
Is, marvelous on my side. Because at this point they say that the visits will be once to twice a month. Okay.
How is that frequency for you? I know they're going to visit you once or twice, and it sounds like that's mostly to see how the machine is coming along. Is that an ideal frequency for you to be working with a pain team?
I think so.
Okay.
And then I have visits with my primary care physician once a month.
Okay. Would you have liked to see your care team even more or less, or the twice a month?
I think right now this is very workable.
Okay, great. Have they ever had to cancel an appointment with you?
No, but I did once.
But you canceled with them?
A family emergency came up, and
sure.
But they were very flexible with rescheduling.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I know you mentioned that when the doctor actually came into your home, the appointment was about an hour and a half.
Right.
And I know you work with a lot of different specialists, so how long is an ideal appointment time for you?
I think in terms of learning to use new equipment, an hour and a half is pretty much ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Shorter shorter. I think once I become used to the machine, ideally then about 45 minutes.
Okay.
But it takes me a while to become comfortable with using something.
Sure.
And, to make sure that I am sure of what I'm doing, because I tend to be forgetful at times.
Okay.
And the other ideal thing for me is the ability to be able to call in and ask questions.
Okay.
If
How
I'm
often
not
do
sure.
you?
I've had to do that, I think, 3 times since I got the machine.
Okay. And it's been about a month since you had it?
Right.
Okay. So you like making phone calls to your doctor's offices?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you email also?
Yes.
Okay. What's your preference between email and phone call?
I like email when it's something that I want to be able to refer back to. After a phone call and we've gone over something, I usually ask them to follow up with an email.
Okay, great.
So that I can go back to the email if I have questions. Because writing is very difficult for me, as I said, with trying to sign things and stuff. So it's not that I can write out the directions myself.
Mm-hmm.
So the email provides me with the written confirmation of what was said.
I see.
And it's also something that somebody else can go over with me if necessary.
Sure. Now, I know history taking is really important, especially when there are complex cases. Can you tell me a little bit about what makes it comfortable for you to speak with your doctor? Certain communication styles, for example, or certain things that a doctor might do to help you build that trust relationship.
One of the things that was good for me was their willingness to have me do a prehistory. They asked me about medication when I first started seeing them and a family history.
Okay.
And because I come from an extremely large family, there were 13 kids.
Wow.
Family history can get to be very complicated.
Sure.
And if I had to do that in the doctor's office, things can become very confusing.
Sure.
I may say my brother, well, which one of my 9 brothers?
Wow. Okay.
Or no, actually, 11 brothers am I talking about?
Wow.
So having it written out ahead of time so that both the doctor and I can, have a written reference point.
Okay.
And dates become confusing for me. So to be able to go back and, this, I already have the date down where such and such occurred, makes it a lot easier too, as opposed to trying to do that in the office.
Okay.
So the flexibility of being willing to, have me tell them what style works best for me.
Sure. Without you feeling confused or on the spot.
Right. Because even a lot of times I bring somebody along to do writing for me and stuff. But when it comes to something that's extremely complex, even that isn't really workable.
Sure. Now, are there certain personality types that you work better with when it comes to working with a doctor?
Somebody who has a friendly manner. I've worked with doctors who've been fairly abrupt. Get impatient when you try to explain something, or I'll lose words and, may say something not in the way that I intended to say it.
Okay.
And some doctors become very impatient with that.
I see.
So having a doctor who understands that part of neurological impairments and part of dementia, which I've also been diagnosed with, is that you may not always use the word that explains things in the best manner. Sometimes you have to do it in a roundabout way. You know, even fairly simple concepts. You know, I joke around that I used to be a very good speller. Now I'll forget how to spell very simple words.
Okay.
Or I'll be trying to, think of, I want something as simple as ketchup, but I can't think of what it's called. So I have to talk around it to be able to come to an understanding with the person as to what I'm trying to say, because I can't find the word.
Right.
And that takes a lot of patience on the part of the individual that I work with. And if the person becomes impatient, then it frequently makes it even more difficult for me.
Absolutely.
I prefer working with women for the most part.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
Especially my primary care physician.
Okay.
I think that's multiple. Again, I have a history of sexual and physical abuse.
Okay.
I'm also a lesbian, so I think just, because of my lifestyle, I prefer working with women.
Okay.
Some of the specialists who I don't see as often, I don't mind being male.
Sure.
But my primary care physician has to be a woman.
Okay.
And somebody that I'm going to work with on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
That's
what makes you most comfortable. Okay.
Right.
That's very important.
But in terms of, a psychiatrist I probably will only see for medication every 2 or 3 months, that can be a man. Likewise, a neurologist, I have no problem with that being a man.
Okay.
But somebody who I'm talking about emotional issues or that I'm seeing on a regular basis and want to make sure that we have a good relationship and understanding with each other, that pretty much has to be a woman.
Okay. You mentioned you had a psychotherapist, correct?
Correct.
So she's a woman too, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay. Is it easier to talk about your history? Have you found that it gets easy? Well, not that it is easy, but, compared to when you were first diagnosed versus now after having managed it for so long. Do you think that changes?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Because as time goes on, it becomes easier to accept certain things. What I do run into is that some things are progressive. So something, I've had disabilities most of my life. So the disabilities that I've dealt with for the majority of my life are relatively easy for me to accept. But as some things become, that I was able to do, become more difficult to do, that's harder for me to accept.
Okay.
Because, it puts more limitations and more dependency on me with other people. And, that's not easy. It's when, I've worked with a lot of disability organizations, and one of the things that they, say is that somebody born blind has a much easier time dealing with being blind than somebody who develops a blindness later in life.
Right.
Somebody born deaf has an easier time than somebody who becomes deaf later in life.
Right.
And so I think that's true with me, but it's, just certain aspects, things that I've never been able to do or lost the ability to do at a very young age. Those are relatively easy for me to, come to terms with.
I see.
But there are times now that I have trouble using the computer. That's always been, typing and, doing things like that has always been really easy for me. I find it very frustrating as I'm making more mistakes on the computer.
Oh.
Because it, gives me a new restriction that I have to come to terms with.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, about the process of coming to terms?
I think part of it is internal. Part of it is sorting through that it's something that is an actual physical, neurological problem as opposed to something that is just in my mind. Because sometimes I think that it's just me, especially the ones that the ability is up and down. Except because when I could do something yesterday and can't do it today, and then can do it tomorrow, then you really begin to wonder about your own sanity.
Oh.
And that I think is, for me, the most frustrating.
Absolutely.
And I think it's the most frustrating for people who deal on a close level with me.
Sure.
Like I know my business partner sometimes gets really impatient, with me because sometimes she'll ask me to do something, like the city sticker on the car is in my name because I can get the city sticker for free because of my disabilities. Sometimes she can ask me to do something like, go through the procedure of getting the city sticker, and there's no problem. Other times, she asked me to do something the other day, and I just come in from doing a lot of laundry because we've had a problem with bed bugs, so virtually everything in the house is being thrown away and had to be washed and stuff like that. I had just come in from doing probably $40 worth of laundry at the laundromat and then sorting through the clothes. So by the time she asked me to do something when she got home that evening, as soon as I hung up the phone, I'd forgotten what she asked me.
Oh.
So that can be frustrating for both of us.
Sure.
Because it's hard for her to understand why sometimes I can function so well and sometimes, it's just, the ability just isn't there.
Okay.
And pain impacts that too, because when the pain is less under control, my ability to focus on other things is more impaired.
That is such a great point that you make. And I think that's another added layer that we don't really get to see. A lot of times, I also interview pain physicians about their experience, and for the most part, they'll say, "Well, I try to see how much it's disrupting the patient's functioning." But what you said is so true because it really takes away your ability to do other things also because you're consumed by the pain.
Right, and your focus is on the pain, especially when the management tools aren't working at the moment. And you don't have the time, nor you don't have the energy to focus on anything else because you're just plain exhausted from dealing with the pain.
And your mind isn't thinking about that either. So, your mind is like wrapped up in trying to figure out the pain and not so much all these other things. So.
Right.
Wow.
And I think that's something that's hard for a physician to, because they're not with the patient on an ongoing basis.
Right.
So at the time that they come into the office, the method may seem to be working effectively. But a couple days later, the pain may overwhelm the therapy that's being used.
Exactly.
And at that point, the patient can be totally dysfunctional.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the hardest part for somebody who doesn't deal with it on an ongoing basis, is to understand that.
Right, and this is different from, how long can you walk or, whatever physical function you're missing out on. There's so much more to it than just the physical function.
Right.
I see. So I guess this is kind of a tie-in to that because that's what's interesting to me too. When you are working or talking about your pain management with your care team, how much of your emotional frustration or psychological frustration gets discussed with your care team?
That actually depends upon how things have gone between one session to the next.
Okay.
If I've been on a fairly high, where the maintenance has been working, fairly effectively for most of the time between the session, we may not focus too much on it.
Okay.
If I've had a lot of frustrations between the two sessions, then we tend to focus more on the frustration of, I couldn't do anything yesterday because I went to get out of bed and my knee collapsed.
Right.
So, it depends upon how things are going between, which is one of the reasons why in the beginning I think it's so important to have the frequency of sessions.
Sure.
Because otherwise a lot of that may be lost.
Exactly. And it is important to provide that information up front so whoever's taking care of you can learn to know what's normal and not normal for you, like creating a baseline. Right.
Because if the sessions aren't frequent enough, then I may go through a very frustrating period, maybe during the first, maybe the first month will go well. The second month may be extremely frustrating, and then the third month, right before I see the doctor, is going well. That in between months may kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Sure.
So until the doctor knows you well enough to know the ups and downs and can identify some of the things that may be causing it, it's the frequency is just, I can't overemphasize how important that is.
Oh, I'm happy to hear you say that. Because we don't want those areas to be overlooked when we think about a comprehensive care treatment plan. And this kind of goes into my point, too, about being able to spend that time with a patient to really get to know them as a person rather than just thinking about, the diagnosis is, of course, very important, but there's so many other components, too. So I think that's what you were speaking to.
Right.
And along those lines, so let's say you did have a frustrating month and you get to see your doctor. Does it help to talk about your frustration? Because you mentioned that you do focus on it more if you have had a frustrating month.
Yeah, it does, because then we can look at, what was the difference between last month and this month? Was there a difference in the diet? Was there a new medication added? Was there a difference in weather?
Sure, especially in Chicago.
Right. What are the various, were there other components? Was there a particularly strong stress factor? Because stress can affect the pain, too.
Absolutely.
So were there stress factors that impacted what was going on? Because all those need to be addressed when you look at why, is there this, huge difference between one period of time to the next.
Right. And say, even if some of those things don't have resolutions, like, it was the weather, of course there's nothing we could do about it.
It still helps to talk about it.
Yes, exactly.
To know that it's not emotional. That I'm not.
You read my mind, yeah.
Right, that I'm not making this all up or hypochondriac.
Okay. So finding some understanding where it's not just, am I just making this up, is huge.
Right.
Okay.
Because I think when I was younger, I was accused a lot of being a hypochondriac.
Oh, you were?
Because my parents pretty much did not accept that there could be anything wrong with any of us.
Oh.
Even something as simple as having hay fever. Every time we went away during the summer, I would get sick, and it was primarily because of hay fever. But even accepting something as simple as allergies, anything wrong with us reflected on them as parents was
even
their
though
way
it was
of
an illness.
interpreting it.
Oh.
Right. So it couldn't be something as simple as hay fever, then all I needed was a medication. You know? All of us had to be physically, perfect.
Oh, my goodness.
So I think that, and, some things, I had a stroke when I was in third grade, which some people are still amazed that a third grader can have a stroke.
Oh, wow.
It was caused by high fevers. I mean, they now say it's a lot more common than people realize in the past. And a lot more people had strokes, and it just wasn't diagnosed. Well, with me, I think it was because of high fevers.
Okay.
Because it was after that I also developed the epilepsy. Prior to the stroke, I was functioning on almost a gifted level. I was reading the newspaper when I was in third grade. I was doing multiplication division.
Mm-hmm.
I started first grade when I was 4 years old.
Wow.
But after the stroke, I lost almost everything. I had to be in speech therapy. I had to learn to walk again, to talk.
Oh.
But you tell that even to a lot of doctors, and they look at you like you're nuts. Third graders can't have strokes. Oh. And yet a lot of the research that I've done on the Internet and as a special education teacher, strokes among children are a lot more common than, a lot more common percentage-wise. I'm not saying that it's not unusual for a person that age to have a stroke, but that it's misdiagnosed in more cases than people realized.
I see.
It's like HIV in women is often misdiagnosed because the symptoms aren't the same as men.
So having that open-mindedness is important.
Right. So I think because of my experience in the past where people tended to think I was making things up because it wasn't within their norm, made it very difficult for me to open up with people because I was used to the skepticism.
Oh. Well, how is it relating to your care team now then? Because I guess they are more aware of your history too. And do you feel more comfortable opening up to them?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah? How would you describe your relationship with your care team?
Well, as I said, it's relatively new, but at this point it seems, really good. Nothing that I've told them have they expressed shock to. I haven't gotten some of the previous reactions of, oh, you're doing that deliberately. There's more of an acceptance that all of these things play a part within each other. You're not just trying to get attention. You're not just, whatever, that I've been told in the past.
Okay, so you're not hearing that from this team?
No. And I didn't from the person I saw, for the last 5 years prior to that. I only had one psychiatrist who was a Freudian, who I very quickly stopped seeing because he was of that old school mentality of not, recognizing how, one thing can overlap with the other.
It also sounds like you're comfortable with making changes if you're not comfortable with them.
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to see somebody that I'm not comfortable with.
Right.
The hardest thing for me in terms of seeing physicians where there's not a transportation system is the transportation.
Right. I'm so glad you have this clinic that's sending people to you now. Right.
But there's still, like the neurologist and the psychiatrist. I never did get to see the neurologist. I still have to reschedule with that. But transportation is the big issue there.
Sure.
Because the person who was going to appointments with me isn't as free to go anymore as she was.
Oh.
Because she's, experiencing some of her own health complications.
Sure. I feel like there must be some resources out there to help you get there. I'm so sorry to hear this.
Yeah, I think once the weather warms up, it will be easier. And
Okay.
then once I can establish, with the tests and stuff,
Mhm.
and not, and only have to go in every few months, it will be a lot easier.
Mhm.
It's just this initial period where I have to see somebody more frequently that
Sure.
the transportation becomes a big issue.
Definitely. So to kind of tie all this together, and you have raised some really good insights, so I really appreciate that too. I was wondering if you could say a few words about what your chronic pain has meant to you throughout your lifetime.
I think frustration is the biggest word.
Okay.
That it seems so easy for other people to do, so many things that it's hard to understand why I can't be like everybody else.
Mm.
Yes, I think that is the main impact that the chronic pain has had on me, is feeling different.
Okay.
And not different in a positive way.
Oh.
I'm very happy being different, in terms of my sexuality, in terms of my personality and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problems with being different.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, have problems with accepting the limitations sometimes.
Sure. Well, I imagine,
especially when I see somebody much younger than me able to do things I can't do.
Mm-hmm. Or I know I've heard also from other chronic pain patients that, the limitations aren't so visible all the time. No one can really see how much pain you have. So.
No, and that I think is one of the other things too. When I was in college back in these period between 68 and 72, I was trained by the federal government as a handicap advocate for the handicapped.
Okay.
And I think that kind of, it still floors me when I think about it, was walking into that room as one of the few people with a non-visible handicap, being told by other people, "What are you doing here?"
Oh.
Because invisible handicaps are really hard for even other people with disabilities to accept.
Listen.
You should have something that we can see.
Oh, that's not fair.
Right. But I even got that, at times from other people with disabilities. And sometimes, I still experience that, when I am with the service dog. What are you doing with the service dog? You're not blind. You're not in a wheelchair.
Oh. So what do you say to them?
I pretty much, it depends upon the situation. The other day I was challenged one day, and I went to the post office, and I simply became very repetitive. This is the service dog. We have the right to be here. She has her tag. You have no right to ask me to leave. I will leave when I finish.
Okay.
So just very repetitive. I'm allergic to your dog. I'm sorry that, that's an issue. I'll try to stay away from you as much as I can, but you're going to have to expect, you're going to have to keep your distance too. I am going to finish what I need to do here. You're welcome to call the police. I have the right to be here. And this is my federal right, and I'm not leaving until I'm done with what I'm doing.
Right. How long have you had your service dog?
I've had her for 5 years.
Oh my goodness. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, she's a medical dog, so one of the things that she does is help to keep me safe when I'm outside if something happens.
I'm really great that you were able to get a service dog. How did that come about?
Actually, I tried to work with some of the organizations, and they weren't equipped or willing to really train the dog, so I ended up going privately.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So I found a dog that kind of has a mellow personality. She's a Shih Tzu.
Oh, Shih Tzus are great for that.
And, it's just worked out well. She's an older dog. I didn't get her until she was about 7.
Okay.
But, she has my personality, just very laid back, very,
That works out well.
Right. She very seldom barks at others. Well, she barks when people come into the house, but when we're outside the house, she very, very seldom barks at somebody. And when she does, it means that for whatever reason she feels threatened or feels that I'm being threatened.
Okay.
And I'm not always able to pick up on why.
Sure.
But I get out of the situation as quickly as possible.
Well, I'm glad you have her. Sounds like you guys are a good fit.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this was exceptional. I was wondering if you had any other comments you wanted to share.
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Thank you so much. I know it's very thorough, and it's not always the easiest thing to talk about, but what you shared was very valuable.
I'm glad.
So, if you don't have any other questions, we could wrap up the interview portion here. And I ordered your Amazon gift card, so I am going to email that to you. I think I just got a confirmation while we were on the phone.
Great.
So that should be there, too. Anything else that I could help with at this point or anything?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. If, as you're going through the notes, you have any additional questions, feel free to call me.
You are a pro at this. Thank you. I was just going to say that, too. Thank you so much. Yeah, I will be doing my analysis and my write-up, and sometimes we just like to fact-check to make sure, like, oh, is this what you meant when you said this? So
right.
You've probably done all that. So
yeah, no, I have no problems with you calling me back.
All right. Thank you so much, and I'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
You have a great day.
You too.
Sure. Bye.